Today's first myth came via email, and it raises the question of whether or not the son of former Rolling Stones guitarist Bill Wyman actually married the mother of his father's second wife. I know it sounds a bit like a soap opera, and it might be a bit confusing in the wording, but it's 100% true, and yet that's not the most scandalous part of that relationship. Bill's son Stephen was born in 1962 to his first wife, who he divorced only a few years later. In the late 80s, Bill married the then 18-year-old Mandy Smith, who he'd apparently been dating already for 5 years, and yes, I meant 5 years. That marriage lasted only about 2 years, but before those divorce papers were finalized, it was revealed that Stephen was engaged to Mandy's mother, and the two of them did marry in 1993. So while no bloodlines were crossed, it is absolutely true that Bill Wyman's son married his step-grandmother. My second myth today was also brought up via email, and it happens to be a personal favorite. The myth concerns the late, great John Coltrane and the decades-old claim that the poem found inside the liner notes to his A Love Supreme album were actually meant to be the lyrics to the album. Recorded in a single session on December 9th, 1964, many people see this record as Coltrane's masterpiece, and he makes no attempt at really hiding the heavy spiritual overtones on this one. However, in terms of the poem and its connection to the music, there is a bit of background information that's necessary. The creative control that Coltrane had on this album is unlike any of his other records. As he wrote the liner notes, he wrote the poem, and he wanted everything to look a very specific way. Also, the entire A Love Supreme suite was only performed once in its entirety, and that was at a festival gig in 1965, so there's a ton of mystery and myth behind the album. But getting to the core issue, yes, there is a very strong and intentional connection between the poem and one section of the music. However, it's not the title track where that connection exists. The poem was actually written to match the album's slower fourth movement called Psalms. And if you read into the liner notes a bit, Coltrane heavily tips his hand at that connection. There have been some performances since by other musicians where they actually read the lyrics along with that section, but for me, I prefer the original without them. So yes, the poem and the liner notes to A Love Supreme do have an unspoken connection to the music. My last myth today also came via email, and it was the question of whether or not the song Cecelia by Simon and Garfunkel are about a saint, maybe an unfaithful lover, or maybe even about a dog. This one's been debated a ton over the years, and I've always felt that Art Garfunkel's statement that this was actually written about Paul Simon's dog was a joke and nothing more, so I don't give that any credence. Now, Saint Cecelia is the patron saint of music, and you can certainly see the interpretation that this song is about someone struggling to find a muse, someone who has writer's block, or something along those lines. And you can really follow every turn of the lyrics to match that interpretation perfectly. However, you can just as easily see this to be written about an unfaithful woman that you just can't get enough of. Paul Simon continues to say that this song is absolutely about the patron saint, but as far as I'm concerned, either of the latter two interpretations are perfectly valid. And the dog interpretation, well, that's just a joke that a lot of people took way too seriously. So those are my myths for this week. Be sure to check back every Friday as I delve into some of the coolest stories in music history. If you've got a myth you want me to look into for you, you can email me at thedailyguru@gmail.com, and I'll see you guys again next time.